Let's get started. I'm so excited and grateful for you being here. My name is Nick Longo. I'm a professor in global studies at Providence College and do work in civic education, and also a deliberative dialogue fellow with Campus Compact this year. And I'm just so excited to have this conversation with you around embedding civic learning across all majors with two of the leading kind of thinkers and practitioners in this work. And you're going to get a chance to hear from Ashwin Vaidya from Montclair State University, where he's the chair of the math department, and I'll introduce him more later. And you're going to get to hear how they're embedding civic learning in some of the STEM fields. And we also have Connie Jorgensen, who's an assistant professor at Piedmont, Virginia Community College. And you're going to hear some of the innovative work that they're doing to embed civic learning into the majors at their university. I'm just to give you a sense of how we're going to work today. This photo up on the screen, I've just got like 3-4 slides to show you. This photo is kind of the ethos that we're hoping to use during our session. This was a photo I took. I was in Cape Town, South Africa, in an engineering course I was sitting in, and on social infrastructures. And it was kind of in this traditional classroom in rows, and there were about 150 students in the class. And, during this session, it was on knowledge. And the instructor, this is Janice McMillan, who's a kind of leader in service learning, civic engagement. They had the session, and the facilitation team invited folks in the classroom. They said, if you speak another language, will you come forward and translate knowledge into that other language? And we had like 15, 20 different people who spoke another language. They came up to the board and translated knowledge. And for me, that was just a good reminder. And I start with this today that, all the knowledge and the skills and the talents that we have on this call today. And so what we're hoping to do is, we're going to introduce some ideas, talk about the work we're doing, but then we also are going to have a little bit of time for a small group and conversation, because we want this to be engaging. And we really want to think through this question that we're posing today is, how do we embed civic learning across all majors? How could this be a part of the experience of our students? And specifically, we're introducing this idea of civic professionalism. So regardless of major, how do students begin to think about the civic dimensions of their work? I'll just say really quickly, there's kind of I think the morning session introduced these ideas, but just really quickly, that kind of what's at stake, this crisis of democracy. And I think there's like 3 big challenges, and this comes at some of the research out of the Kettering Foundation. And one is just this loss of trust in government and major institutions. And almost any indicator you look at, you'll see that people have lost trust across the board, including in higher education. And this is a challenge to democracy. But there's a second piece of this of where trust goes both ways. And there's also a loss of trust between institutions not trusting folks, not trusting ordinary people. And so there's this civic empowerment gap where citizens and active engagement, and those folks are often on the sidelines, and the ones who are most vocal in public life aren't always the most constructive. So you kind of have active citizenship on the sidelines. And then a third piece is that we have this set of adaptive challenges. So adaptive challenges or wicked problems are things that can't be solved with technical solutions. And more and more we see democracy itself as an adaptive challenge, and the challenges we're seeing in democracy, but larger issues like racism, climate change, educational inequity, these are all adaptive challenges that can't be solved with any technical way. It requires new ways of thinking and acting. And I think what we're all here today is that we think that higher education has a role in solving these adaptive challenges. Kind of the response that we're offering today, and kind of this idea of civic engagement across in the major, is this idea of educating civic professionals. And civic professionals are folks who have a public identity and a deliberate way of acting that enables them to share power, work collaboratively, and engage the public to address wicked problems. Right, so this is like a different skill set that we want students to get than what they're getting in their kind of major in kind of being professionals, but we also want them to have this civic identity. Albert Zer talks about this as professional training, capabilities, and authority to help people to solve problems together, and even more important, to recognize what kind of problems they need to solve. So this is the idea of moving beyond specialized ways of identifying problems and engaging with the public so that we can really think about how we name and frame problems that we can then do joint problem solving. And the core question that Zur talks about is, how can professional actors help mobilize rather than immobilize, expand rather than shrink democratic authority? So civic professionals, these are kind of folks in our majors. We want them to learn, to listen to local knowledge, to share tasks, to catalyze public participation among diverse communities, to facilitate constructive dialogue, create a sense of inclusion and belonging, recognize assets, empower marginalized and underrepresented voices, be able to improvise with creative and innovative responses, to learn as much as they teach, and to serve the public with their expertise. Now, this slide on the right is just a reminder that in our majors, we still want folks to develop their expertise. This is from the cartoon from the New Yorker, and it says, "These smug pilots have lost touch with regular passengers like us. Who thinks I should fly the plane?" So there's a set of expertise that we need. We need pilots. We need folks in English who can write. We need STEM professionals. So we want this professional expertise, but we're kind of inviting to think about that differently. And this chart here, and this is the last slide before I introduce our panelists, is just kind of this shift in mindset that we're kind of offering today. And this is a shift from kind of this idea of training outside experts to training civic or citizen professionals. And this is from Harry Boyd's work. And he talks about kind of a shift in motive from altruistic service to co-creation and joint problem solving, a shift from experts to being citizens, working collaboratively with professionals and amateurs working together, a shift from being able to fix problems for people to solve problems collaboratively, expert intervention to public work, a didactic approach to an apprenticeship model, abstract theory and book learning to local situational theory, practitioner-based approaches, a skill set around disaggregation, analysis, and application to synthesis, integration, contextualized understanding. So really what we're asking is, how do we still teach the expertise and the professional knowledge that folks need, but then we do that in a different way, where professionals have these civic capabilities to be able to engage the public and problem solve. We are lucky today that we have two folks who are just doing this in just really innovative ways. I've got just 3 questions. So just the way we're going to work, I'm going to kind of ask these 3 questions of our expert panelists. They're going to engage it. We're going to tell their story about how they're doing their work at Montclair State University and Piedmont, Virginia Community College. And then we're going to invite you to be part of this conversation to think about these same sets of questions about how you're engaging with this work. Throughout this, I would invite you, and it seems like people are already doing this, add your questions, add your introductions in the chat. As we're going, feel free to comment. Like when I'm doing online teaching, what I often find is the more active the chat is, the better the session has been. So feel free to be active and go back and forth and be in conversation during the chat. I'm going to add our facilitators' bios into the chat, so we don't have to do long introductions to them, but you're going to get to hear their story, and then I'll also put links to the bio so you can get to know them and their work even more. And I want to start with Ashwin. From Ashwin, would you be willing, and Ashwin, if folks haven't already seen this, Bringing Theory to Practice did this amazing, they do an active newsletter each month that they send out, kind of highlighting some best practices in the field. And Ashwin's work was highlighted in the last newsletter. So I would encourage folks to take a look at that. And now you're going to get a chance to hear a little bit more of his story. So Ashwin, I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about your story? So kind of your personal story, how you came to this, to see the importance of civic learning across the curriculum, and specifically in the STEM areas where you have an expertise, and why is this, and why was this important to you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation, and this is very exciting, and I'm honored, or also a little humbled by being called an expert. I'm a fellow traveler in this journey with all of you. I've only spent a few years thinking about it, so but it's been exciting because I think this is a time when things have converged in the right manner for us. So I'm Ashwin Vaidya. I'm a professor of mathematics and the chair of mathematics at Montclair State University in New Jersey. And I have a joint appointment in physics as well. So my background is in mathematics and physics. If you ask any mathematician or physicist what draws them to this field at its core, and forgive me for being a little theatrical about it, but they would say truth and beauty. And honestly, you may think that these are sort of high-flying ideas, but it's not. It's at its core, mathematicians find mathematics beautiful. It is a gorgeous subject, and that is what attracts us to it. But at the same time, what makes it beautiful is also its abstraction, right? And this is what drew me to mathematics and physics, is that's very abstract. It's far removed from the messiness of human affairs. And I came in to be an astronomer, and I would look up at the stars, and I did this for a long time, and it was gorgeous. But I think with age, you realize, and so I wanted nothing to do with human problems. But some of my work, and so this is very interesting, it's a very nonlinear journey, so I can't tell you this happened and this caused that. There's no cause and effect. But it's an accumulation of all kinds of various events. And my work started to move in the direction of thermodynamics, through which I started studying this concept of entropy, or in simpler language, perhaps side effects. And I was also deeply interested in philosophy along all this time. So while truth and beauty are important intangible elements in the pursuit of science, one of the things that are sort of often left out is this concept of ethics. We don't discuss it in the sciences. We don't discuss ethical aspects of society. And to me, that became important with age. So I kept asking, what are the ethical ramifications of what I do? And I have to say that, I mean, this is not all stuff in isolation. This is not the brainchild. All this work is not my own. I had the luxury and the good fortune to work with some amazing people, including the Associate Vice President of Community Partnerships at Montclair State University, Brian Murdoch. I became a fellow in his engaged program, faculty engaged program. It was a 2-year program that brings together faculty members to talk about civic engagement. And this is through my sabbatical, right after my sabbatical, when I was reading more about these things, I joined his team, became a fellow, and started to participate. And that gave me some insights. It pushed me forward in this direction. So one other thing about mathematics in particular is it's very challenging because it's so abstract. It's so hard to think about how you would introduce civic engagement and community engagement in mathematics. And there's no obvious answer. Of course, I can talk about examples in the classroom, but that's not fulfilling. That didn't feel like it was enough. So it took a lot of help. And Brian put us in touch with some amazing partners. Karen Musil, who's an independent consultant and used to be at AACU, Ariane Hoy from the Bonner Foundation, Paul Shadowald from Bringing Theory to Practice at Elon University. So we had some amazing people helping us through this process. With their help, I think we've brought in several elements, and we managed to sort of rethink the purpose of mathematics. So there's sort of several different directions in which students who study mathematics become teachers, or they go into more abstract mathematics, higher mathematics, get a PhD and become faculty members like me. Or there are a bunch who would like to go to Wall Street. And to me, math was there's an element, this ethical element, and I call this project Math for Main Street, that there was that aspect of mathematics that was missing, that you can do public good with math. And so I think over the last maybe 5-6 years, I've been trying to work in this direction.
Thank you so much. I love the idea of finding math beautiful and doing the public good with math, and starting with an invitation in some ways, and community of folks. So thank you so much for that opening. Now I want to introduce Connie Jorgensen, who's assistant professor at Piedmont, Virginia Community College, I'm going to put a link to this, but she was the winner of the Dale Parnell Distinguished Faculty Award from the American Association of Colleges, from Community Colleges. Thank you so much for being with us today. And same question for you, honey. Like, can you tell a little bit about your story and specifically how you came to see the importance of civic learning across the curriculum and specifically in your area? You know, why is this work important to you?
Okay, well, first off, thanks for having me. This is such an important discussion. And every time I attend something like this, I learn all sorts of really exciting new things. And I can't wait to hear more about math and physics and so on. Surprisingly, much to my surprise, apparently I was wrong, but the people who want to do civic engagement most on my campus is the math department. So, I mean, how cool is this? But anyway, how did I get here? Somebody I think has a...
Yeah, I don't know where that's coming from. I think it got muted.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Long story short about how I got here. I'd always been, you know, my father voted. I kind of worshiped my father. So voting was really important because he did it. Participating was really important because he did it. And then when I got to Charlottesville, I live in Charlottesville, Virginia. I got a job as a legislative aide to one of our members of the House of Delegates. And what I learned from this experience was how one person can make a difference in the legislature. For example, you come to a citizen comes to a legislator and says, this is wrong, we need to change it. A bill gets drafted, bill might get passed. I saw several instances in my time where one person wrote a letter. This is how long ago this was, they were writing letters. One person wrote a letter to my delegate about a bill that was a no-brainer. I mean, it was just everybody was going to vote for it. And she said, but wait a minute, you didn't consider what might happen to me if this was passed. And it was like this light went off. It's not quite that simple. There's all these unintended consequences, and those unintended consequences are going to happen if people don't speak up. So I got really sort of engaged that way, seeing what a citizen can do. And at the same time, I was adjuncting in political science. And one of the things I always ask my students during the first couple of days of class is what you're majoring in and how the government affects your major or your chosen career. And it fascinated me how few of our students really made that connection, right? I'm a teacher. The state pays my salary. The state sets out our learning standards. Nurses, you know, all this stuff, they weren't quite getting that career public policy connection. So we'd have a long talk about that. So all this is kind of going on in the back of my mind. I've run a civic engagement conference now at Piedmont. I did a running for office thing, but all these were democratic engagement. As I said, I teach at Piedmont Virginia Community College in Charlottesville. And as you may recall, in 2017, the Unite the Right rally happened in Charlottesville, where 3 people died. It was a total ugly weekend. And we came back to school like within days of that happening. And our students were flipped out, our faculty were flipped out. Nobody knew how to talk about this. Nobody knew what the reaction would be if it brought up in class. Some faculty didn't want it to be brought up. Other faculty wanted training on how to discuss it. So this really kind of kickstarted our ideas about civic engagement at PVCC. So again, you know, I hate to thank a crisis, but the crisis really opened up our minds and opened up our awareness to what we should be doing or what we can do to educate students about, you know, what happened to the Unite the Right rally? What happened on January 6th? Why is the government important to an engineering major? How do you apply physics concepts to public policy? and so on and so forth. I'll talk more about what we're doing in a little bit, but I think tornado warning, I'm so sorry, be careful. So I'll talk a little bit more about exactly what we're doing in a minute, but again, I'm really excited to be here and to hear all your thoughts about this.
Well, thank you so much, Connie. And that's so powerful, this idea of, you know, really a crisis like Charlottesville is a call to action. Like, you know, we can't stand aside, we have to respond. And sometimes it takes those kinds of crises to get us to kind of open up and really think more creatively. So thank you. And we look forward to hearing more about how you're doing it. So that's our next question. We're back to Ashwin. I'm wondering if you could tell us, you know, Liz was nice enough to put a link to the article, which talks a little bit about kind of how you're doing things at Montclair State University. But I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit how you are going about incorporating civic learning into the STEM fields at Montclair State University.
Sure. So we've tried, I think, through these workshops with the Center for Community Engagement, we've sort of introduced to the SOTL idea, right? So basically, what we started this project by introducing projects in classes. So the very first thing I remember doing, which was a very exciting project, was a collaborative project in a classroom in a calculus course that I was teaching. And we teamed up with other courses. So an anthropology course, environmental science course, a biology course, and a sociology course. And so the bunch of us decided to do a single project, which was embedded in the community. And we would teach our own subjects, but we would simply come together to talk with each other about different elements. So we would take on different aspects of the project depending on what we were teaching. And the project happened to be situated in Lake Greenwood, which was experiencing further north of campus, and it was experiencing some algae bloom issues about 4 or 5 years ago. And so we all met on campus. We did a field trip to Lake Greenwood, met with the Environmental Commission. The class met with the townsfolk, heard about the problems. And then we came back to the class and we decided to see what we could do within our classroom. So in the calculus class, what we did is we actually collected data. The biology students who were studying the lake and the algae bloom concentration of the lake gave us the data, and we used calculus to analyze the data. It wasn't too complex, but nevertheless, it was rooted in a particular problem that our community was facing. And then we collectively did a town hall event at the end of the course. We invited the Environmental Commission, we invited people from the town, we had experts to talk about environmental issues, students presented their work. Students were so excited. And you know, every semester I'm going to get this question, all of us get this question, why am I learning this? What's the point of this? I never once got that, right? You proved the point. You tell me why this is useful, right? They discovered it for themselves. It was a fabulous project. And then I got encouraged, I got excited about this. And so I also teach a climate change course every year. So I decided in one of my climate, this is the middle of the pandemic, and we were doing this online. So I decided that what I would have students do is interview somebody from their community. It could be a neighbor, it could be a family member, it could be anybody, you know, interview your grandmother once a week and talk about climate science. Don't preach, don't teach them anything. We're learning about the science, we're learning about the issues, just have a conversation, record the conversations, ask them what they think, see what they know, and just in the passing, maybe mention what you've learned in the class, but bring back those ideas to the classroom because we have much to learn from the community as well. The point of climate science or science in general is not to tell people how things are, but to create a story, to create a framework for the kinds of problems we're facing. And then we'll work out the solutions later. So you don't start with the solutions. You really have to learn what the problem is, which means even if you're a mathematician, you're trying to study a biological problem, a social problem, any problem, you first have to understand the system you're studying. So go in with a sense of humility, learn, come back, and then let's discuss what's at stake. And so the students would bring back and say, my grandmother tells me that when she lived in Poland in the 1930s, whatever, the 30s or 20s before she immigrated, this was what she experienced. Summers were like this, winters were like this, right? Anecdotal information, but it has great value to the classroom. We would try and tie it up to the kinds of things we were reading about. But it gave them a sense that other people know something. They know this in a certain way. But then when we bring physics and mathematics and geology and biology to the, to this picture, it also tells a certain kind of story. Let's see how it fits in, right? And then actually some of the projects that emerged were just amazing because people built sort of bonds with their neighbors. They started continuing this project even beyond the scope of this course. They would email me later and say, I had this conversation today, thanks to you, this project was so great. And I had no idea where this was going, but it sort of took on a life of its own. And I'm realizing slowly what it means to be embedded in the community, what it means to take physics and math, right? I don't have to decide at the beginning what the project is going to be. We come up with an idea, let's explore, let's put it out there, and let's see how it, it percolates through. So my attempt has been over the last few years to see if we can find simple questions and projects that can be used as prompts in courses. And I think through this, it's not possible to do this in every course, but we're trying to simply encourage faculty members teaching a course to then simply raise a question. The scope of the project can be as big as one imagines. So my attempt has been to try and get buy-in from my faculty members, and it's kind of nice to be a chair in some sense. You have some authority in. I mean, I can't force people to do things, but I can certainly sow the seeds of sort of to a wider group, right? So we have department meetings, and I keep bringing this up. We have brown bag sessions, and I'll keep pushing my agenda. Get a little selfish at times, and keep talking about the same things, but it has encouraged more people to participate. They're already sometimes doing things. I don't know about it. I didn't realize there's a group of faculty working on social justice in the department, math for social justice. And these are math educators. But it's very exciting for me to know that there's already work in this direction. Let's combine it with work somebody else is doing. So in the curricular sense, there's work going on to sort of transform the curriculum, develop lesson plans, and make it a permanent feature of our courses. We're also trying to revise our entire program to make it sort of more focused on math for peace, math for public good. So we've tried to develop a track now where instead of taking math and, students who are not sure, we've had a few students in one of the previous panels. I had two of my students participate and talk about the kinds of things they've done in their program, what they've decided to do with math. We have a lot of free electives, and what I've decided is to create a particular track, a community engagement track within the math program with these free electives, where we don't, it's just it's an informal track, but we encourage them to take certain courses, we encourage them to partake in certain experiences. We developed an outreach program called the STEM Core Fellows Program within the department. It was initially funded through some funding through the Bonner Foundation. We were able to give students modest stipends to participate in informal projects. So they had to commit to 30 hours of informal project for a semester. And they did some amazing work. We had to actually create some partnerships. So we created some partnerships with a STEM center in Kenya. This is to, kids in under-resourced schools in a tiny village in Kenya. We were able to connect with them online, and some of our students participating designed a curriculum, a fun math curriculum for them. And every Friday morning, 3 of our students would participate and join them and do some fun activities. And those kids loved it. They had a great experience, on both sides. We're now partnering with, through the STEM Core Fellows program, students are working also with a peace building organization on a project, Math for Peace project. And there's two aspects to this. One is that developing a curriculum for peace builders, negotiators, who are not necessarily trained in math or on the quantitative side of things. So there's a nonprofit called Mediators Beyond Borders. And I happen to know the CEO of this organization. She reached out to me and said, can you design a course on critical thinking for our peace builders? And so I'm working with students to design something that we could offer as a 2-hour, 4-hour course, a brief course just on how do you read data? How do you make sense of stuff before you go to a negotiation table? And these are peace builders around the world who go to like really, I mean, they work on very, very difficult issues. So it's got us thinking about what math means to, you know, in the context of peace building. And then the other side is to go back to this SOTL, to have an integrated framework. So we have courses, we have extracurricular experiences. We're trying to encourage research within the department on various topics. We have students now doing research projects with us as part of courses, as sort of capstone projects on various themes. One of these students is working on building using mathematical models to build alert systems for violence, to predict violence possibly, and sort of aggressive events. So yeah, so this has been sort of overall effort has been, we're trying to integrate all of these, bring it all together so it all makes sense in the context of mathematics. So math doesn't seem as abstract. It's completely rooted in the community. So I mean, I'm being educated. I'm learning so much, and I'm feel very thankful to have so many people around me who support this initiative. So besides people, we're also lucky because our president of the university is deeply committed to community engagement, and he's really pushed forward this agenda. So having the right supports in place is very important.
Thank you so much, Ashwin. That's so helpful in terms of like just the concrete assignments you can use to using your administrative position to build a culture around this, to doing it, you know, really in a deeper, inclusive, embedded way. So thank you for offering that example. And it's just so powerful what you're doing. Connie, same question for you with Piedmont, Virginia Community College. Could you tell us more about how you're doing it? How are you incorporating civic learning into your discipline?
I sure will. All of you being faculty or college, higher education folks know what it means to go through accreditation. One of the upsides of accreditation for us, we're accredited by SACS COC, and they require us to do a quality enhancement plan, which is a 5-year plan in some way to improve life for your students. And I mean, 10 years ago, we did writing across the curriculum, for example. Well, this year again, or this time, again, in large part because of the Unite the Right rally and the struggle we were having at the college, the faculty and staff voted, we had a vote, and civic engagement was the topic of our QEP this year. So I have this kind of advantage right now in the civic engagement is part of our accreditation. So they kind of have to support me for the time being. And that allowed us this opportunity to develop a 5-year plan that was going to come with funding, really gave us a lot to think about in terms of how we wanted civic engagement to play out at our school. We were not allowed to add any credits to the curriculum. That was one of the absolute no's. Because our first thought was a civic engagement class where you learn civic engagement. Well, no, we can't do that. So we put together, you know, all of the co-curricular stuff you would imagine, right? And then we talked about how to get civic learning through the curriculum, and we developed what we're calling a civic engagement course. We stole a lot of these ideas from other colleges, so some of you may recognize your own programs here. But what we've done is we've required that our students take a civic engagement class in their major to graduate. So if you're an engineering major, the designated civic engagement class is physics. Okay, if you are, there's an accounting class, there is a biology class, there, you know, lots of social science classes, but in every major, you've got to have one. The civic engagement assignment has to be 25% of the grade, so it's a hefty piece. And we're not trying to get them to add additional content to their courses, but to teach their courses in a different way. So I'm going to use, Ashwin, I really want to take your classes. I'm not a math person, but I want you. But one of my favorite examples of a class that was developed was in physics. And first I need to back up a second. We are a community college, so all we're teaching is gen ed, right? So it was additionally difficult for us to do this in gen ed because gen ed classes are very content heavy and don't leave a whole lot of room for, you know, extra activities. So somehow we had to incorporate these assignments as part of what we were regularly doing. So physics professor, she said, you know, can't do it. Too much content. Physics has nothing to do with civic engagement, on and on and on. And then she called me just all excited one day. She said, I've got it. This was at the beginning of the pandemic. She said, physics, fluid dynamics, force, propulsion, blah, 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 right? She said, we're going to talk about the physics of a sneeze. And then we're going to apply that to mask wearing. I mean, how brilliant is that, right? Isn't it, I just love it. And so there's a lot of creative stuff that was happening in these general education courses. In biology, she focuses, she didn't change her curriculum, but as part of what she teaches about bacteria-resistant bacteria. And with every lesson, somehow that's connected to the biology course. And by the end of the course, they've learned about bacteria-resistant bacteria, antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And they can talk about policies about prescribing drugs and so on and so forth. For me, teaching political science, this has been fairly easy. But one of the cool things we do is we take my political science class and a journalism class and do a joint civic engagement project where my students do the research for a nonpartisan voter guide and the journalism students have to lay it out, right? And they learn lessons on bias, they learn lessons on research. It's a really, really great project. Other things that we do, one of my favorite examples is in an economics class. She had them write papers on the economic effects of banning abortion, pro or con. So she was able to have the abortion discussion in a totally different environment, you know, where we're just talking about what does this mean economically. We're not talking about morals, religion, ethics, or anything else. We're talking about economics. So this has been really exciting for us. Some of our faculty tell me that it's changed the way they think about teaching, that they like the way they're teaching now better than before because it's becoming more relevant. Other things we're trying to do is integrate deliberative dialogue into the classroom. I'm doing that in my classes. In one of our English classes, she had them write write the issue guide, write an issue guide, and then have the deliberative dialogue, which was also a really cool project. We're still learning a lot. We are really pushing, obviously, civility and being able to discuss issues factually and being good consumers of media. We've really pushed civic literacy in terms of news literacy. And that's also across the curriculum, that's people are bringing that into their class more than they used to. I feel really good about what we're doing. We've only been doing this now for about 3 years. We've got 2 more years on the QEP. And my hope is that by the time our QEP is done, this will be so institutionalized that we can't stop. And there will be a faculty uprising if they try. So that's what I got.
I love it. I would love to see a faculty uprising in support of civic learning. Yes. So Connie, last question, and I'm going to ask you to just answer this in 1 minute or less.
Okay.
So we have just what kind of challenges are you struggling with as you try to incorporate this? And specifically, what's a question that you're asking or you kind of put forward in this work?
Well, my biggest challenge, and this may be happening in 2-year schools more than 4-year schools, but there's a real emphasis on graduation. I mean, we want to get as many people, a higher percentage graduated as possible, right? So we want to get them in and get them out, right? And for some people, civic engagement is just an unnecessary hurdle for students to jump. And I want to fight that attitude. I don't like the get them in, get them out idea as much as some people do, I think, because I think we miss out on a lot of learning. And I think that civic learning could be a victim of that. And so what I want to see is if we can do it, in order to keep this in our schools, I want to see data on retention. If students who participate in civic engagement work, whether it's registering voters or whatever, do they graduate at a higher rate? And I know longitudinal studies are really difficult after students have graduated, but I'd really like data on what this means to them 5-10 years out, because that's what's going to keep it in our programs. So that would be my biggest challenge. And the other challenge is to knock down silos at the college, to do more of this multidisciplinary civic engagement work. Have two or three classes doing the same project, but you're doing it from a political science and a geology and an English perspective. And we can create assignments working together. I love that, love knocking down the silos. So that's
awesome.
Those are my challenges.
Thank you. Ashwin, I'm going to ask you the same final question and also ask you to do it in a minute. Kind of challenges and questions.
Seconds. I'll do it in 30 seconds. I agree.
Oh man, well, that'll be impressive. Challenges and end question.
I agree with Connie. I think that's the gist of my message. But oh wait, yeah, I'm on. But one of the main challenges might be, I think, finding partners in the community, because we're trying to go beyond simply. We want students to gain a real experience in the community, and so I'm not disheartened. I think it just takes time to do that. We're working in that direction, but also to convince students that if you're coming in to learn math, that don't be alarmed if we take you outside the classroom. So convincing students that this is worth their while, that they will be surprised and excited and experience something wonderful. I'm not sure if I should call these challenges necessarily. These are just sometimes minor stumbling blocks. It takes a little conversation, but one can get past. But yeah, silos I think might be the biggest one.
Thank you. I'm going to put us back in our gallery view. So we've got about 10 minutes left. We were thinking about going to small groups, but I think actually it'd be better just to stay in this big group, because if we go to small groups, I think we'll lose a lot of folks. Some people might be multitasking, might be watching the World Cup. I don't know if the game's still on in the background, but wanted to invite you all to kind of answer these same questions, add it to the chat, specifically these last two, kind of like how you're doing this work. So folks want to add their story, their kind of best practices, but then also what you're struggling with, what questions you have. And we want to kind of use the resources of this learning community to at least start a conversation. You could also respond to anything that Connie and Ashwin have said, things that you see connections. So we just kind of want to open this up. You could write in the chat. You can also raise your hand as a way to get it. That kind of with a larger group like this is probably the easiest way to know who wants to speak. John, go for it.
Just a spin on what you're saying in terms of challenges, turning it into an opportunity, pairing the two. One challenge is that many of our faculty and staff, virtually all of us, are at SUNY Cortland, I'm sure we're not alone, understaffed and overworked. We have a new provost coming in as just one example, among others. However, we're also starting to take a look. We've just gotten our middle states accreditation re-upped, but we're also taking a look at redoing our strategic plan. We already embedded applied learning into the previous plan. So now sounds like the right time to integrate democratic engagement in many ways. And so my comment here deals with opportunities that we might be facing in addition to challenges.
Awesome. Thank you, John. This is really helpful. We also have some conversation in the chat. For our university, it's hard to get buy-in from faculty to engage in civic engagement. So folks have examples like that. Lauren is doing faculty engagement for a campus vote project and would love to connect with folks who are thinking about that. Elizabeth they're adding to their general ed civic learning leadership requirements. They're ready to put our money where our mouths are. That's awesome. Staff capacity is a real challenge. Patty Robinson, the biggest challenge is facing turf wars and silos. So that seems like that's a recurring theme for a lot of folks. Other challenges that our campus no longer supports learning communities. So these are really helpful. We've got a few more minutes. Other folks want to kind of respond to some of these challenges, raise a question that you're struggling with, kind of thinking about adding some best practices. It seems like folks are interested. I could call on our panelists, but I'll see if other folks want to as well add their voices to, especially how you engage faculty in this work, because it seems like two themes are how to engage faculty and how to move beyond silos.
For us, the faculty engagement piece took some tender loving care. We had to do a lot of training because, nobody was ever taught to teach civic engagement in grad school, right? So we had to do a lot of training about how to do it. But as soon as a couple faculty were doing it, and more faculty, as we were talking about it, realized that they were already doing it. They just didn't realize it and just had to kind of shift things around in their course a little bit to have a big old civic engagement assignment. People change pretty quickly. And I think the students also like it. At least our anecdotal evidence so far is that the students are really enjoying it and enjoying that different take on their classes.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous. We've got some other folks. John talks about the importance of having civic and democratic engagement supported and encouraged in the faculty handbook. So building that into, I think, tenure and promotion guidelines and having that be something that's recognized and rewarded. Scott talks about it's happening in pockets in the campus. Question about how to make the work visible, how to create a campus culture that embraces civic engagement and learning. One thing we're doing for visibility, I'll just add really quickly, is we now have 5 of these on our campus. We have democracy walls. So we've got these spaces on campus where we ask different kinds of questions related to public life. Sometimes they're fun questions about like, what's the best, like this last question up on one of the walls was like, what's the best thing that happened to you in 2022? So kind of fun, but then also larger questions about, how can our campus go about addressing racism? Sometimes there's a controversy on campus and we use these public spaces as a way to start the conversation and then also try to embed those into different classes. Claire, thanks for being here. You're up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for a great session. I think folks who are at community colleges, as I am, really struggle with this issue that Connie mentioned about the 2-year prerogative. There's such a focus on getting students in, getting what they need, and getting them out, as though getting them out is really the goal, because that's how we get our funding. So when students stay in, they progress and they graduate, our funding is cherry. And then if we ask anything extra, and that's how it's perceived. Civic learning is perceived as extra and not integral. And so that piece is like a major hurdle, I think, for us. I'm a librarian, so I can only try to promote certain kinds of assignment building and things like that, but I don't actually do them myself. So we have a very disconnected sense about the importance of civic learning in the community college setting. I think that's a huge challenge for us, and it's not insurmountable. It's totally solvable, but all of these comments in the chat about siloing and all of that really impacts us a lot. A lot of our faculty are part-timers, they're untenured, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just a lot of other layers of challenges for the community college setting. And I hope we can overcome them, because I think it's an imperative, really. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for adding those additional challenges, especially in the community college setting, but also the sense of hopefulness. Sam, and there's also some great conversation going on in the chat. I'm not going to read it all, but I'm going to invite you to go take a look at it.
I just want to kind of make a comment on the community college side. This is for proposals for accreditation within health science for PTA programs. So I'll probably be coming in some of the others, but with justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, that will be part of our required elements that we have to report to. And so we'll have to find activities within the classroom, within the clinical, when the students are working with patients and talking about some of these issues in the civic engagement. So whether that's going on community or running scenarios, you know, if y'all have an allied health department within your community college, you can collaborate with them. And if you say, hey, I've got a project I'd like to work with you on, they would be more than glad to be able to show that to their accrediting body that they've worked across their department and division. And that makes their job even easier. So I think you would have very willing partners in the health science side, because their accreditation standards will be implementing that in the foreseeable future.
Oh, thank you so much for that. That's really helpful. And it's really smart about thinking about how to be strategic about this. How do you get this in professional associations? How do you get it in an accrediting body? How do you embed it in kind of tenure promotion and kind of reward structures on campus? So thank you for that. We are just about out of time. So I want to make sure one last thing I want to just add is that I'm working with Campus Compact and AAC&U. And in January, we have a toolkit that's coming out, and it's called Practicing Democracy. And it's a toolkit for facilitating and educating civic professionals. So this is going to be a really practical guide for folks to use across the curriculum. It has 12 different lesson plans in it around kind of how you think about civic professionalism, building skills like facilitative leadership, public narrative, asset-based community development, doing one-to-ones, naming and framing conversations. And then it's got a series of vignettes and case studies. It's going to be a free resource that's going to be online through AAC&U and Campus Compact. So keep an eye out for that coming out in January. And then I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here. This is a huge commitment and just like such a robust group that came. We were not expecting this many folks. So thank you for being here. And thank you for the brilliance, Connie and Ashwin, for your work, what you're doing, and for sharing that with us today. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to engaging you all in the rest of the conversations. I know there's going to be another session now. And then tomorrow there's some corridor conversations, which are going to be really kind of conversation-based opportunities to engage with colleagues from across campuses. So thank you all so much for being part of this session.
Thanks, everyone.